The Unseen Guest, a haunting two-part horror tale. Part 1. The invitation. It was a cold, rainy night when Emma returned home to find a strange note slipped under her apartment door. The note was old, the paper yellowed and brittle, with shaky handwriting that read, "Join us for dinner. Midnight. Room 313." Emma lived in apartment 314, and she knew there was no room 313 on her floor, or so she thought. She tried to dismiss it as a prank, but as the hours ticked closer to midnight, a gnawing curiosity grew within her. The thought of something hidden, something unexplained, was too strong to ignore. Against her better judgment, Emma found herself stepping out into the dimly lit hallway as the clock struck midnight. The hallway seemed different tonight, longer and more sinister, as if it was alive and watching her every move. The door numbers blurred as she walked, but eventually, she came to an old, battered door with the number 313 scratched into the wood. A door that shouldn't exist. Her heart pounded in her chest as she reached out and knocked. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a dimly lit room that looked as if it had been untouched for decades. A long dining table stood at the center, covered in dust, with empty plates and silverware set for a feast. The air was thick with an unplaceable, ancient scent. Shadows danced along the walls, cast by the flickering light of a single candle. Emma hesitated at the threshold, every instinct screaming at her to turn back, but something compelled her to step inside. The moment she did, the door slammed shut behind her with a deafening crash, plunging her into an eerie silence. She was trapped. And then, fear gripped Emma as she ran to the door, desperately trying to open it, but it was locked tight. She was alone, or so she thought. When she turned back to the table, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The once empty chairs now seemed occupied by faint, ghostly figures, their forms barely visible in the dim light. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly, and she could see her breath in the cold air. As she watched in horror, cold, skeletal hands began to emerge from the shadows, reaching out toward her with a deliberate, unsettling slowness. The hands were pulling her, dragging her toward the head of the table. Emma's heart raced as she tried to resist, but she was powerless against the unseen force. Her screams echoed in the room, but they were swallowed by the oppressive silence. She was forced into the seat at the head of the table, where the ghostly figures began to whisper her name, their voices overlapping in a chilling, haunting melody. As she looked down at the silver platter placed before her, her reflection began to distort. It was no longer her face staring back, but a twisted, grotesque version of herself, pale, with hollow eyes and a malicious grin. The reflection began to move on its own, mocking her terror. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into pitch-black darkness. In the darkness, Emma felt a cold breath on the back of her neck, and she knew something was standing right behind her. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and something far worse, fear itself. The lights flashed back on, and the ghostly figures were gone. The room was silent once more, but Emma knew she wasn't alone. She could feel their presence, watching her, waiting. The door to the room slowly creaked open, and she ran out, desperate to escape. But as she burst into the hallway, she found herself back in her own apartment, standing in front of her door. Everything seemed normal, except for the faint whispering that still echoed in her ears, a haunting reminder that she would never truly be alone again.